Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 303. I'm recording this very late. Hopefully I'll have it tomorrow for Monday on the channel. But hey everyone, it's been a busy week, but here we have Hero Academia. Let's get into it. So this week, in general thoughts, there's not that many. And it's partly due to the nature of the chapter. When you look at the chapter, the beginning portion of it is essentially just people talking with each other, so they're just exchanging information, and that information is stuff that we already know. It's just the characters are finally catching up with it. So the situation here is that this chapter doesn't really propel us that forward. It ends off on a point that the majority of the readership could have guessed was going on, that being Izuku is talking to the predecessors. We all guessed that that was happening. We just got the confirmation, right? It's a really drawn out, hey, we're going here. When you're looking at it, it's a transition chapter. Now, the thing is, there are still nice things here, but the things that are nice are more the characters interacting with each other. If you're a fan of the characters talking with each other, then this is probably going to be a really good chapter for you. But if you're a person that wants to move on with the story, well, this was a transition chapter that pretty much only, again, tells the characters the things that the readers already know. And unfortunately, it's not really cathartic because there's not really much tension here. We've been in Endeavor's, we've been watching Endeavor for the last 3 chapters, right? We are not really moving all that much. So it does ultimately affect the energy for the chapter. That said, I do want to very quickly touch on last week's situation with the error. So as it turned out, the error had already come out on Twitter, and I didn't check Twitter because I didn't think I'd have to check Twitter to find out about an error that had occurred in the manga. But we found out, for anyone that doesn't know, officially, the chapter from last week, 302, is the one that's mistaken. If you were watching the video last week, you know what I'm talking about. It's mistaken. The tweet from Shonen Jump said that the issue specifically is the line where Ray says, "You grew worse and worse until I couldn't stand the sight of you. I got so bad I even started seeing hints of you in the children's faces." Now, they're saying that this is the error. And I just want to talk about this because Horikoshi's been caught out with another error. The man's been having a lot of errors recently. He's probably super stressed. Honestly, whenever there's a movie in the background, the guy, something happens with the quality of the manga. I'm actually very curious about this situation because last week we did talk about the weirdness of chapter 250 being the correct one. And what we ultimately have here, Shonen Jump says that the error happens in Ray's dialogue box, but I don't think so. I think this is a bigger error because it's not just Ray's dialogue box that is incorrect. Even what she's saying, the way that everything was drawn, I do believe Horikoshi was committed on 302's version. What that is to say is that I am very curious about the final version of chapter 302, specifically the one that's going to come out in the volume. I want to see if it's going to be more redone, and I just gotta say it out here, I don't know if Twitter's already, or if there's been a tweet, an announcement about it being super corrected. I don't know. I did a quick look, but I couldn't spot anything. But that might just be because I'm not very good at using Twitter. So just keep that in mind. Right now, the situation, what I will say, 302 is the incorrect continuity. Chapter 250 is the correct continuity from what they are saying. The way that Horikoshi built 302, it legitimately seems to me that what happened is they can't change 250 because 250 has too many chapters or too many volumes in circulation. They have to change the most recent one. I think there was a legitimate mistake here. I am curious to see how they're going to fix it. And just going back to touch on 302's situation, like again, the problem is the timeline. What you ultimately have to take away from 302 the way it is right now is that Ray deteriorated in the span of 1 season, that being winter. So that gives us 4 months roughly to work with. The timeline is loose enough because Toya wanted to see Endeavor on his day off, but one problem with 302 is that when Endeavor goes to see the fire and the blaze, Endeavor's wearing his hero outfit. So this did not happen on Endeavor's day off. This happened in a random day that he was still working. It just makes the timeline really difficult. The author does have enough space here to work with it, but this is definitely a tough situation. And again, I'm very interested in looking at the volume release for chapter 302. Anyway, at the end of the day, I love when mistakes happen, because mistakes are where you get to see a little bit of a glimpse as to what's going on behind the scenes. Anyway, let's get into this week's shenanigans. Starting with page 1. The useless transitionary page that only really tells us that Hawks and Best Jeanist are interested in helping, which we already knew. Best Jeanist does look pretty good though. He's always a very slick guy. Page 2. The thing that really got me curious was how Ray, she was so close to the bed, but she ended up right at Hawks' feet. Now, honestly, very simple. Hawks walked up to her. It's just kind of, it's a weird little bit of construction going on the page. Anyway, something interesting had happened here. Hawks gave us a little bit of a time frame when he had said that he was discharged the day before. So really interesting. I think that the author put that there because I think it was done to give a time period where Hawks could have maybe have found out about One for All being something talked about in the media sphere. Anyway, on this page, Ray apologizes in the accepted Japanese fashion, and we find out about illegal denim. I am very curious as to what illegal denim is. Page 3 is exchange of information, but actually there's something interesting every 2 panels, and some of it can be really interesting depending on how hyper analytic you want to be here. Anyway, first this panel. Interesting that the author is taking time to point out that these people are interested in the origins of Dobby still. What's occurring here is that I believe this is a narrative cue to say that this is the next big mystery. And the tell here is the assumption that Best Jeanist makes. He assumes that Dobby was only fully created at the moment of survival, as opposed to being justifiably created due to the neglect. What's interesting is that Dobby himself doesn't really refer to his survival as a critical factor in his rhetoric. He only ever really fixates on Endeavor and most recently his family. What I'm saying is that this comes in so heavy-handedly, and it comes in from the most suspicious character that it has to be a narrative cue. Because had this come from Endeavor's family, the people who have a legitimate right to ask, how did Dobby survive? It would have been more natural. But Best Jeanist saying it is the thing that tips me off specifically. What I really want to say here is that it comes off so heavy-handed that when something is this heavy-handed, it's because there's some kind of thought that's occurring in the background. Usually, if Horikoshi forgets, then this plot point goes nowhere, but it's a very interesting little tell here. Next on this page, Hawks makes a connection between Endeavor's obsession and his behavior. This is really good because remember, Hawks is one of the people that presented Endeavor's obsession in a redeemable light. He has to address this element here. The other person that reinterpreted Endeavor in a more positive light was Ray, and Ray's already been addressed in this situation. Next panel here was Ray saying that it was her that burned Shoto. So this is really important. Recall, Shoto believes his burn came from Endeavor. That's how he internalizes it. So note these panels, how Shoto fell silent. This was actually really beautiful. So it's important because these 2 panels by themselves, they reflect what the last chapters were about. No one person has blame in this situation. That's what the manga wants to say. Shoto himself can interpret Endeavor as solely being at fault, but that's not the case for Shoto's mother. His mother will take the blame 100%. And that's why you have that little bit of complexity with Shoto here. He can't say no to his mother, even though he doesn't believe what she believes in this particular situation. To some degree, he is acknowledging the muddiness of the situation. Now, for me personally, I think it's easy to say that this is a complex issue, but it's important to remember that Ray's crime here, if we can say she has a crime, was that she was too weak. That's really her only sin, because really everything comes from her fragility. For these type of problems, it's up to you, the reader, to decide to what degree you want to blame weakness. Moving on, page 4. I like this page the least. What does this page tell you, the reader? It tells you that Hawks respects Shoto for doing something that Hawks believe he couldn't do. Now, The fact of the respect, that's cool. However, when taken in conjunction with last week's chapter, I personally don't agree with the situation. I believe that Hawks is conflating two, I won't say very different, but let's say different situations. First, Guy, your father tried to steal a car to abandon your family, and your mother looks like she's on drugs. Hawks, because of your agreement, your mom got to live in a suspiciously spacious interior. Feeling bad for your mom is one thing, because that can still be like worked with. But your deadbeat father who killed someone over pocket change and shoved you in a shack and then tried to skip town on you by stealing a car? Holy crap moly. In real life, I would call this rosy retrospection. Hawks is looking back at this situation because he's gotten so far away from it. He's looking at it with like rose-tinted goggles, and it's like, nah man, nah, you should not be looking at your father thinking you should have not given up on him. I think Hawks has forgotten how bad his dad was in universe, and at the end of the day, I believe that this is an extremely flawed line of thought. The question though is always, is this an intended character flaw that, you know, is there to set Hawks up for a rude awakening, or perhaps a storyline with his pops, or for some closure? Or is this author-enforced propaganda? Is Horikoshi compromising on a character to push the Shoto is actually amazing platform? Well, with last week, I think it might still be propaganda. Here's the thing, like ultimately this type of moment can only be judged from the perspective of the future, because an author, they always have the ability to turn something stupid into something brilliant if they have enough time and if they care enough. So, like I said last week, you know, the author wants to sell me on Shoto actually being amazing. And this week, he has now Hawks making an unfair comparison, glossing over, I think, critical differences in the situation. You know, not even talking about how Shoto was ultimately helped by Izuku. Not even acknowledging that, right? But I'm digressing. Ultimately, I'm not buying it. I don't want to be told that Shoto is amazing. I want to see it as well. If you want to give Shoto other accolades to make him seem like this incredible character, do it while giving him accolades comparable to the main characters in another arena. If you want to have the social accolades, also have the really cool, you know, manga shonen-y accolades as well. The worst case in this situation that we need to avoid is the author reducing Shoto's screen time in favor of Endeavor's screen time, and then coming in at the end to talk up Shoto like, yeah, oh my god, yo, Shoto made more friends. He made 2 more friends. Guys, that's amazing. Like, I'm sure Ray will be shouting from the rooftops. Or maybe like, hey guys, guess what? Shoto has a girlfriend. Actually, that would actually be really monumental. Honestly, I'd be totally happy with that. Like, heck man, you could take Shoto entirely out of the manga and just give me the justification that he's too busy, like with his relationship with Momo or something, and like, man, let me tell you, I would not complain. Shoto would be the best character, top 5 characters at that moment. He could just leave the entire story. Just give me that excuse and I'll be like, all right, I respect that. For the sake of future Shonen Jump series, I respect that, but of course we're not going to get that. That's the only way that Horikoshi could even begin to sell me on the Shoto propaganda. You tell me he's with Momo, that's the only way I'm getting on that propaganda train. But yeah, no. What I'm talking about here, really, is just an issue that does occur in Shonen. Like, characters get overshadowed, and then, you know, by the time that it's too late, an author realizes like, oh shit, you know, like this other character actually is supposed to be a big deal, and then they come in and they do the bare minimum. But at the end of the day, with Shoto here, like the biggest transgression to me with Shoto's storyline is that you have Shoto in his weakest moment, and you chose not to show that. I don't think Shoto is an afterthought. So seeing the author treat him as an afterthought and then try to remind us that Shoto is still amazing, nah. Put in the same amount of effort that you put into Endeavor. But I know most likely that's not going to happen because Endeavor is more compelling. But again, you see a chapter like this and it's like, it's not going to happen. Endeavor is the more compelling one, at least for this storyline. Shoto's Hope is going to be a storyline where Endeavor isn't around, because otherwise Endeavor's going to take up the time. Page 5 is a summary of the situation that we know. I have a note here on the 132 villains. That number is really funny, because usually when I have to make up a random number, if I'm not rolling dice for it, I'm just looking at a sequence of numbers like 4, 5, 6 or something like that, and then I just like rearrange them. When I see the 132, I honestly think, Horikoshi, I think he might have just thought you just like imagined 1, 2, 3, and then you just rearranged it because you realized 1, 2, 3 would have been 2 on the nose. People are biased into number patterns that are familiar, unfortunately. There's a lot of really interesting anecdotes about this, and 1, 2, 3 is a very familiar number pattern because of the progression of the numbers. So I do think that's what happened there. I do think that's what happened. He went for I don't know. I find it really funny. Anyway, the big thing here was the confirmation of the dead Safety Commission members. On page 6, we have Hawks again. He brought up the problem with the civilians fighting villains. Horikoshi wants to make it very clear this is a legitimate plot point. And it's, again, he wants to make sure that we all understand the civilians are in the wrong. Or not in the wrong, but the civilians are not making the situation better. I will say, though, again, really scummy that so many people are backing down when so many people are stepping up. Really scummy. Like, if I was a hero, you know what? In this situation, if I was like one of the first world hero kind of things, I'd probably retire from being a hero proper, but then I'd be back on the streets. If my neighbor from down the street is going out there fighting villains, me who has experience fighting villains, yeah, obviously I'm gonna help him. I'm gonna be as aggressive as the civilians are. Like, pretty much as a hero, if you're seeing a situation, this is pretty much time for you to go hog wild if you can afford to. So yeah, just wanted to say that was kind of scummy there. Anyway, now this page is the one that got a lot of people excited when we were looking at the spoilers. So it's the idea that heroes could come from the international community. Now, I get the hype. I know one of these heroes is one of the designs from the movie, and honestly, it being a design from the movie makes it even more unlikely that it's going to show up. But I do legitimately think that the fandom needs to steal their expectations. Ideally, they don't try to hype up these heroes, because let me remind you, this gallery of villains. Remember what Horikoshi does with his designs. What do you really know about Crust? What do you really know about Yoroi? What do you really know about Wash? Right? You know more about Rocklock than you do any of those 3 characters. Don't even get me started on the villain side of things. I think it's better to expect the bare minimum in this case than it is to expect something amazing. And the bare minimum is these heroes showing up for a few panels and making a few statements. If we get lucky, one of them will have a presence comparable to Best Jeanist in the story. If we get lucky. If we get 3 with Best Jeanist level of impact in the story, that would be amazing. But I don't think we should get our hopes up for it. Just because of the history of the manga, we're 300 chapters in. The guy's patterns are set at this point. Even in this page, look at the language that the author wrote here. With the Safety Commission essentially shut down, the paperwork needed to dispatch heroes isn't getting done. That is the most clear example of a guy telling the readers, don't expect these guys to show up very quickly here. These guys are not going to be taking the center stage. When I read this line, I don't get excited. What I'm reading is, this is the excuse as to why people aren't going to come to help Japan when Japan needs it the most. It's an excuse for our characters to continue struggling. Again, best case scenario, they show up at the clutch moment to help out. But honestly, like you guys remember when I was hoping for international community to show up. Honestly, they should have done this for the actual war. It's a little bit too late now. Page 7 is the most important page for anyone with irrational hate towards Endeavor. I'm going to lend my full support to anyone trying to be better. Imagine how the world would be if we denied people who were legitimately trying a path to reform. Mind you, if you say that Endeavor should still settle his karmic debt, that's a very worthwhile point and very fair. But the important thing here is we should be willing to help people who have legitimately reformed. And in this case, Hawks is saying it right here. But of course, with the most vocal fans, this kind of stuff, they probably won't notice. Anyway, on this page we have the top 3 heroes teaming up, which is really cool. That felt really good. A really good character moment. Page 8 was another beautiful Endeavor page. It's clear who the star Todoroki is once again. On this page, Natsu decides to be tsundere, and at this point, I can't wait to see Dabi in all his burned garbage smell glory. Coming into the house, taking Natsu's girlfriend hostage, and then really reminding him, or really showing Natsu what kind of man Dabi really is. That said, it does look like Natsu legitimately is having trouble here. He's probably going to go through a similar cycle that Shoto went through. But this looks like the face of a man that's about to come face to face with cruel reality. Anyway, page 9, we enter a page that brought new info. The reporters know about One for All. But before I get to that, I have to talk about something that's way more important. What the heck is Rei wearing, man? What is that? Why does it look like someone bolted a cap into her head? It's so creepy. Why didn't she get a nicer hat like Fuyumi's instead of what looks like a bolted on helmet? She looks like she came out of brain surgery. Like, holy crap, what a horrid choice in apparel. If she picked that herself, I can see why she's in a mental hospital. Anyway, other detail. Hawks thought up a statement. The fact that he's thinking up statements for Endeavor is really important because these guys need to be smart. We absolutely cannot let the public find out about One for All because that will make things worse. Remember, the public is being portrayed as desperate and scared. In other words, the public at large is mentally weak. And in a bigger sense, they are playing into the villain's hands. Remember, this is what Destro wants. He wants this chaos. They are all playing into the villain's hands. The public as an entity, they are not rational. Secondly, recall how messy just having Night Eye know about One for All was. Izuku's self-esteem would not survive people knowing about his situation. So the top 3 heroes need to lie about One for All. Izuku can't be trusted to stay strong, and the public is much too weak to handle that info without falling to their baser natures. Maybe if this was One Piece's level of general public, it would be different. Because the One Piece general public is like one of the most tested quantities in the One Piece universe. When you need an idealistic solution, it's the One Piece general public that you believe in, not the Hero Academia general public. Moving on, page 10. So the reporters heard about the One for All phrase. Now on the live stream, people were curious about who blabbed, but also on live stream, people pointed out that Endeavor said that for many heroes to hear. So really, it doesn't matter who blabbed unless Horikoshi wants to make that a big plot point. It can go either way. But, for instance, if he does make a big deal of it, he could say, like, maybe Burnin mentioned it to the press as a way to rebel against Endeavor. You know, like, make some drama point. And if that happens, I'd be like, okay, you know, that's cool, but really, other people could have probably also blabbed. And even on the flashbacks that Horikoshi provides, even there, we have Endeavor saying attention all. So that tells us that he was on a communication line. Now, speaking of communication lines, there's something that's kind of wonky here. And I think it's just important to just remind ourselves what's going on. When you look at the flashbacks, attention all Endeavor here, you know, then Endeavor says One for All. And then you have the flashback of Izuku saying, sorry for using the private frequency. That line, private frequency, is really important to just remember the situation here. What Horikoshi is trying to say is that Endeavor told everyone about One for All, but Izuku only told Endeavor about him being the target. That's why Horikoshi is reminding you about the private frequency line. And there's more evidence to support this. Izuku was not talking to everyone else. Endeavor was talking to everyone else. Chapter 275. In this chapter, Gran Torino mentioned that he only heard One for All. He makes no mention of Izuku saying that he's going to lure him away. If he had heard Izuku saying, I'm going to lure him away, Gran Torino would have been like, I was freaked out the moment I heard you say that, instead of just narrowing in on One for All. Is it an important distinction? Because when I was rereading this, I thought, is it possible for one receiver to be receiving multiple frequencies? And I'm like, it must be. Like, it'd have to have multiple antennas. It'd have to have multiple signal processing units to be able to receive the different signals and put them together in one ear. It is really interesting. Given that Horikoshi doesn't really know technology, though, given what he does with Momo's powers, you know, you can let it slide. But I do think important to just have the note there. No one knows about what Izuku said except Endeavor. Page 12 is a useless page, more or less. Page 13, more of 1A. So the big takeaway here is that the kids are not doing shift work after all. They were just in another part of the hospital. those were my two alternatives. So glad we got one. I do want to say here, the big takeaway, especially after seeing how everyone was getting excited, spreading doom and gloom about like Kaminari being a traitor because we weren't seeing him. I want to just point out, remember, like sometimes the simplest answer is the most mundane answer. Kaminari was in the hospital. He wasn't a traitor. Not in this moment in time. And when it came to Ida and Ochako and Suyu, well, they were just outside of Izuku's room. Who would have thought? Also, I believe that this is not Izuku's mom. I think this is a nurse. It looks like it's kind of a nurse. Anyway, by page 14, we find out Izuku's body is okay, whatever that means. And we have Ochako saying that she's worried. I think that was actually a really pretty shot of Ochako. And then we have a nice little moment between Best Jeanist and Bakugo. Really, again, not a really important page. Page 15, though, is a cool one. It's the confirmation that Izuku's talking with the predecessors, as many of us thought. I do like what All Might says, though, that he can feel the version of him inside of One For All. That's really neat. That's like legitimately so cool. I was so excited to just reading that. That one line almost made the 2 pages for me, even though these are like not the greatest pages. I do want to say here, Hawks is noticing stuff, so he's probably gonna he's gonna be able to pull he's most likely gonna be able to put things together. But yeah, that's the chapter. So where does that really leave us? Well, we're going to see Izuku in the other world next week. That's gonna be really, really cool. I would assume that Izuku's gonna have more development in his One For All world body compared to last time. Like when we saw him versus Shigaraki, that state, he's going to have a little bit more. I do think this would be the best time to really talk about the Danger Sense user. I think this would be the best time to maybe say, like, if Danger Sense has a problem, maybe have it here. We know that Izuku, or it's heavily suggested that Izuku was being fed images through Danger Sense. So, I'm going to bring that idea back up. I think it would be cool if Danger Sense is actually causing a situation with Izuku in that he's getting too much despair and feedback. Like, all the reporters outside the hospital are freaking out. If Izuku's picking up on all the strife, then it's going to be there. If there's multiple people in the hospital right now who are on their deathbed, maybe he's also picking that up too, because it's the danger of it's still dangerous towards those people. So I would like to maybe have some talk about Danger Sense next week, and I would like to also see what's up with the situation inside of Izuku's body. Izuku's been asleep for 2 days, right? This isn't a simple, I'm talking with the predecessors. This is something more. Something is stalling Izuku's mind and preventing it from waking up. And right now, that 5th user, he's the guy that's got the weird little plot development. Will we see the 2 shaded out users? Maybe. Maybe at the end. Now, one thing I will say is that I think keeping Bakugo away is not the good move here. I think Bakugo should be closer to Izuku. I think Bakugo is one of the people that could potentially wake him up. But yeah, it looks like we're going to cut off here. I really hope we don't go back to Hawks and them. It looks like Hawks doesn't want to make his move until he gets the information about One For All. So let's cross our fingers and hope that we get to know what Izuku is doing next week. Now, I think what would be interesting to ask is, on what note will they leave Izuku in the next chapter? Because, like, if we think about what cliffhangers Horikoshi wants to create, maybe we can get a better sense of what's going on here. I feel like if we're talking about a cliffhanger, next week is going to end off on something, maybe someone telling some story. Maybe next week ends off on a flashback within a flash, or yeah, maybe next week ends off on another flashback. I think that would make sense. Maybe one of the users tells Izuku about a story, because I do believe we still need some of the story told to us. It'll be interesting. Anyway, everyone, let me know what you thought down below. Thanks for watching, and till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.